Hello stars and welcome back to another episode of Better SMP. In the last episode we entered a space race, but more notably for today we also dug into the core of the Obelisk. I'm thinking today we harness the energy found deep within the glowstone here. And to start doing that, we're going to need to mine out an entire area here for us to work in. However, mining with a pickaxe is kind of boring, so I want to try something a little more sneaky today. Honestly, I'm not really sure it's gonna work, but I'm sure as heck gonna try. You see, I'm gonna utilize the Huh? That's just a camera watching me. Alright, let's get rid of that. I have no idea why somebody is watching me right now. I'm feeling a little anxious, so I'm gonna look around and just make sure that there is no more cameras around. Oh yeah, and by the way, on stream, we were able to renovate this pod, so we have removed the big cluster that we made in episode 2 and moved it up here, and now it looks a whole lot more clean. No cameras in here. Huh, what the heck? Why is there cameras all over the place? That is deeply concerning. Alright, I did a scan of the remaining pods in this main area, and it seems like I could only find 2 cameras, so I'm gonna assume that is all that there is. Anyways, as I was saying, today I'm going to try something sneaky when it comes to mining the space out. You see, I believe if we use a cart assembler, we could potentially have an instant carve room device. I plan on doing this by making a very large cube attached to a card assembler and just picking it up and then placing it down and hoping that glued blocks replace the unglued blocks within the space. I hope I don't need to emphasize the myriad of ways this experiment can go horribly wrong, as there is a good chance we end up just destroying a bunch of our own blocks and wasting time. Alright, so I've figured out the general shape that I want for this room. We may expand it manually, but this will work as a very good starting base if our idea works. Alright, I've now finished, and this looks especially weird as a solid shape, but I'm hoping that it looks a bit better once we're actually underground and able to carve this region out. And now with the whole structure glued together, this is the moment of truth, whether or not this will pick up as a minecart. So without a further ado, minecart in here. And oh my goodness, it actually picked up. That is spectacular. Okay, so just to make sure that you guys are 100% following what's happening here, we're placing this down. Obviously, this does nothing as an entity, but if we place the cart assembler down with no redstone power, then that's going to convert the entity back into a model. So when I place this down, this is going to place all the blocks and potentially ruin everything, but 3, 2, 1, go. Oh my goodness, I think it worked! I need to make a lever here because I need to pick this cart back up, but without a further ado, oh, we've just carved a square space, so I guess I accidentally, due to how I glued it, caused a square space to be made. I've gone upstairs just to check out the collateral, and this is really weird looking. Seeing this whole area now lined up as a square space is kind of making me think that it might be nice to have this room be square as a contrast to the very rounded shape within the central room. I don't really want to detract from the very oomph that can be found within the core of the obelisk. Now I am actually doing a tiny bit of manual carving, as the space that we carved out I am pretty satisfied with as a floor plan, but there is the issue of these kind of rim borders that I want to install around this room, which makes it a little more problematic. Okay, so I've finally gotten this room to a size where I'm pretty satisfied, but we need to decorate this thing. So if we go over here and do a little spin, you'll now see that we have this wonderful workspace ready for us to set up the technology needed to create electricity for our future rocket plans. And I guess with this space built, it is finally time to explain how I plan to harness electricity from this place. First, I'm going to need to give you guys a little lesson about how energy works in the Create mod. So we'll start with a site that I'm sure you guys will find familiar. The water wheel. If we pour some water here, you can see that the water wheel begins to spin. However, a water wheel is not that desirable to power a huge facility that this will soon be. This is because of a mechanic known as stress units. As you can see, this thing only outputs 512 stress units. We're using none of the stress units, so how do you actually use stress units in the Create mod? If we pull out the example from episode 2, the mechanical press, you'll see that this uses 32 stress units, which is 6% of our total output. However, there is a little more to this system. You see, this mechanical press is horrendously slow. So slow, in fact, that it takes this entire clip for just a single piece of metal to be pressed. So of course, with a water wheel, you'd want to speed it up and have it running as fast as possible. By continually increasing the speed of the rotation, we can achieve this speed. However, when we try to run our mechanical press off of it, you'll notice that the entire system is overstressed. In fact, we are 200% overstressed because this requires 1024 stress units, while we are only producing 512 stress units. This means the faster we run systems, the more stressful it's going to be on our total power output, which is why we can't really use water wheels in the long term. So packing this all up, it is now time to explain my proposed alternative to water wheels. You see, underneath the core of the obelisk is something that we can definitely harness. Lava. And we are going to make a farm for lava to power these guys. Now you might be wondering how these guys can even produce stress units. For that, I'm going to need to introduce another concept to you. Pipes and fluids. Within Create mod, there are systems in place to allow for fuel tanks, pipes, and of course, pumps. The setup we have here is a fuel tank, 2 pipes, and a pump, which we will be powering by hand just for example's sake. So if I place pipes like so, we can then get a water source block here for the sake of example. And if we start powering this thing, we will suck up the water and get it into our tank. As you can see, we have the water in our tank. We can also convert a lot of these pipes to glass just to help emphasize this. And if we want to get water out of a tank, we can simply reverse the pump like so. And as you can see, the water is being spat out of the tank now. This is relevant because we intend to use steam engine down here, which is essentially a large tank of water boiled underneath these guys. However, you might notice we have a lot of these. This is because a water tank can be a 1x1, but it can also be a 4x4, and of course you probably see where this is going. It can be a 9x9 if you want to get crazy with it. So the heart and soul of our power system is going to be steam engines, which, as you can see, once you attach to a tank of water, changes up how it functions. And then when we place a shaft nearby, this will be our output for the stress units that we're producing. So once we start boiling a fuel tank with blaze burners, we'll get a pretty substantial output here. And obviously we can increase the size and capacity of this and allow for further output by having more steam engines attached. However, that obviously raises some challenges. Firstly, where are we going to get water from? And I think we're going to need to go all the way to this lake underneath the drill and run a pump line all the way down to this room here. With all of that being set out, I decided that the best course of action would be to deal with the core of the obelisk and harvesting lava first, which we are going to use the classic Minecraft method of using dripstone and cauldrons. However, we're going to add some create spice to it. So now that I have all the cauldrons set up, sapping the energy from the core, I can now run a pipe network below the cauldrons and then get a pump set up to extract the lava automatically for us, meaning that this becomes an instantly renewable resource. I've now installed this system, and as you can see, there's a pump under here which is extracting the lava towards the back of this room. And I'm thinking that we replace this copper pillar with a fuel tank. However, with all of these pumps, we actually are going to need a system to kickstart this whole thing. So I've dug out this little area under here, and while we made fun of them, our old friend, the water wheel, will actually serve quite useful here. However, as I demonstrated before, a single water wheel isn't actually going to get us all that far. So I have instead set up a system that will allow us to run several water wheels at a time here. Utilizing this system, we now have 3 water wheels connected, which is roughly 1,500 stress units to work with, which should hopefully be enough to operate the pumps at a manageable rate. We've done our standard overclocking, and looking at this speed, this seems like a reasonable rate. So I'm going to spin these cogwheels and get our first pump going. However, as you can see, we are currently jammed up here as we need to be running cogwheels at every given point that requires them. Whoop, and there we go. One more thing of lava successfully pumped, and all of a sudden we are now getting lava flowing throughout this entire system here. So the final step here is replacing this copper pillar with a tank before we set on fire and die. And as you can see, look at that. The lava is quickly filling up at a very impressive rate, to be honest. And there we go. 10k MB in the tank, which I believe stands for millibuckets. Don't quote me on that. But with 10k now rapidly approaching 11k, that means we have a total of 11 buckets of lava in here. 1000 MB is equal to 1 bucket worth of fluid. And we only need 9 to fuel this for an entire rotation. So I think we're going to be very sustainable with this, but I could be eating these words in the next episode. We'll just need to really wait and see. With the lava tank now covered, I can turn my attention to the water aspect of this steam engine, which, as stated before, I plan to get from the lake up above. So the general idea that I have here is to have this center block on the roof feed down a pipe into the fuel tank. And from here, the destination from under here to this lake isn't actually that bad. So we're going to start piping right away. All right, and some more hard work later, and we have successfully installed a huge pipeline all the way from this little lake here to the main facility here. So all that remains is now powering these pipes. And I think while it would be novel to connect our temporary systems together, it just kind of feels like a bit too much work, especially when it's only water wheel power. So I think I'm going to make a second water wheel power station for the express purposes of powering the water pipeline. I'm now done building a secondary water wheel setup, and unlike the other one that we have here, we have 6. With this setup, we have double the power, but every last bit counts, as I believe we have twice as many pumps with this part of the build. And with all of this now being done, I think it's finally time that I teach you guys about gearboxes. Essentially, gearboxes are blocks that can take a rotational signal from, let's say, this direction, and once it receives a signal, it will output it on the 3 remaining sides of it. This is helpful in a situation here, where instead of doing a bunch of mumbo-jumbo with the gears, we can just use one single block, and like that, the entire system is now online and pumping water. Funnily enough, we can tell that the system is working due to a waterlogged slab. All we need to do is break this slab and channel it down into the fluid container. However, 2 blocks high is a little small, so we're going to increase the size of this 2 times over, and then finally, without a further ado, fill this thing up with water. And as you can see, we are already filling this thing up with water, which is absolutely perfect. So with the water portion of this project being complete, there is now one more thing we need to do to get this whole thing operational, which will require us to extract lava from this tank, put it into lava buckets, and then feed the lava buckets into these blaze burners to boil the water and make steam, and in turn make rotational power and stress units. The process of doing this is going to introduce us to even more components from the Create mod. So we're going to walk through the entire process slowly. One of the parts that we're going to need for this process is a mechanical arm. And unfortunately, there's this little thing called a precision mechanism, which is a very complicated craft. Essentially, we need a gold sheet, and we need to place a cogwheel, a large cogwheel, and an iron nugget 5 times in total. And even at that, there is a 20% chance that the process fails. So this is a very careful process. First, we need to put the sheet in here, and then one at a time, put the cogwheel in, then the large cogwheel, and then the iron nugget. And now we need to repeat this process 5 times and just hope with all our little heart that we're able to craft this thing without any problems. Moment of truth, let's see. Okay, thank goodness we're able to craft a precision mechanism, which means we have a total of 1 mechanical arm, not including all of the brass and other bits that we need. This is just the most complicated part of the crafting recipe. Whew, okay, and that is the second one entirely secured as well. So we are completely good to proceed with this project. And of course I'm crafting all the other components that we need. I just figured I should explain that one since it was a bit more elaborate than any of the other ingredients. Alright, I'm back by the engine and I have our mechanical arm built. This is obviously quite a flashy component, but it compares nothing to how essential this next part is going to be for our future automated builds. Introducing the mechanical belt. Now, it's probably very self-explanatory what this thing does, but essentially, once rotation is given to one of these 2 shafts, both sides of the belt will move, and anything atop the belt will be automatically transported. So to power this conveyor belt, we need to look back at our friend, the gearbox. So if you put a gearbox in a crafting table, you'll actually get a vertical configuration of the block, which allows you to take rotational signals like this and carry it upwards with little to no issue. And then if we simply put a gear here and a gear here, we have a moving conveyor belt, which can transport items across of it. Of course, you might be looking at this whole thing and wondering how we're going to be getting lava buckets on this. I introduced to you the spout. The spout essentially connects up to a fuel tank and dispenses whatever liquid is inside into a container below. In this example, it's showing bottles, but for our case, we are going to be using lava buckets. So if we get a pump here and a spout here, all we need to do now is power the pump itself. If we do this and this, as you can see, we have instantly filled the spout up with it ready to dispense. Only thing we really need left is a bucket to test this thing out. So without a further ado, the first bucket of our steampunk steam-powered engine. And as you can see, this thing is working marvels. It is redistributing the bucket at the back of the line so it can use it to get refueled and restocked. I now have 2 buckets on the system and it seems like that's going to cut it. And as you can see, all of our blaze burners are active. So there is only one final thing we need to do to get this entire system operational, and it is super exciting. Now, this could be a moment of truth because there could be a myriad of issues with our Steam engine, but here's hoping everything is a-okay. So if we start putting the engines on like so, as you can see, we now have steam power, and look at this. This is absolutely insane. However, it appears that water is our limiting factor here. So we're going to need to go up here again and overclock our water engine just a little bit more. But before we do that, I want to point out that the water wheels generate 500 stress units, and this thing, not even at its full potential, is currently making 98,000 stress units. So needless to say, the core of the Obelisk is going to sustain us for the entire series. I now have upped the amount of water wheels powering this setup. And as you can see, I have also set it to pump at ludicrous speeds. I believe this is the fastest you can spin in create mod, so hopefully this is pumping water fast enough into our steam engine that we're able to get another notch or two of power out of it. Okay, and moment of truth, yes. Okay, we are pumping more water into the boiler than what is needed. However, to increase the heat of the boiler is a lot of extra work that I probably won't be doing this series. So for now, this is perfectly adequate. 147,000 stress units. I cannot emphasize enough how borderline insane of a number that is. I did some tidying up here, and now you can see that all of these steam engines are working in tandem to put the power into this andesite grid we have here. The rotational power is actually being carried out in the floor, as all of this is actually gearboxes and shafts, which can be concealed by using andesite casing. And just look at that. We now have power running in every direction of this facility. So we are going to be ready to kick this factory into full gear in the next episode. Anyways, with all of that being said and done, I think it is finally time we wrap up today's very complicated episode. In the next episode, I plan to tinker with the boundless amounts of power this project has yielded. So if that sounds like a whole bunch of fun, then that episode should be available right now for channel members if you're watching this publicly. And if you happen to be a channel member, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It really helps out. And if for whatever reason you're not a channel member, don't worry, you can still support me a whole heap by subscribing and liking the video. But anyways, with all of that being said, I think I will see you guys in the next one.